Hello and welcome. This is Pussy, Mind and Soul. My name is Sophia and my guest today is called Katzi Schamens. She is the co-founder of Shamanika Yoga School. She teaches yoga since 11 years and she does many more other things. And in this conversation we talk about how sometimes we have these pivoting moments, like these strong experiences that can change our life and our career forever, that can really change the direction of it, give it another spin. She had one of these moments and we talked about it. And also, I personally find it super inspiring about Katzi, how she manages to be in one niche, but also explore professionally different interests. For example, she likes, of course, consciousness and the spiritual world, and she also has a lot of fun in the party scene in Berlin. She also likes techno music, and at the moment, now in the summer of 2023, she's around visiting a lot of really nice techno festivals and raves, and she loves that. And she also loves teaching yoga. And yeah, for me, I always think it's super inspiring when people dare to show different aspects of what they are and of what they like, also professionally. And yeah, if that's something that also you feel inside of yourself, then I hope this episode inspires you and maybe gives you some new ideas and some motivation on your path. All right, have fun listening. Hello and welcome. This is a new episode of Pussy, Mind and Soul, and today I have a wonderful guest. Today, Katzi from Shamanica Yoga School is here to answer some questions. Welcome, Katzi.
Thank you, Sophia.
So, I think I want to know what Shamanica Yoga School is, but we're going to get to that a bit later. First of all, I want to ask you about your path. When I invited you, I sent you a message on Instagram. And did you scroll up? Did you see that I sent you a message, I think in 2019 or something, when I joined one of your yoga classes?
I mean, I know we've been connected for quite a while.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So I joined one of your classes in Dharma Yoga in Neukölln. I think 2019 and then afterwards I sent you a message. I was like, oh my God, it was such a good class. And now a few years later, you're here. And yeah, I'm really excited that I can ask you a few questions today because to me, I can really, what I see when I look at your career or your Instagram presence, I can really see that it's unique what you do and that you found your authenticity as a teacher, how you teach, what else you do besides teaching yoga that also influences your yoga career. And I think, me, it really inspires, and maybe it's also inspirational for some other people how can we find our unique expression. And but let's start in the beginning. How did you become a yoga teacher? When did it all start? How was your path?
Yeah, so actually I was in fashion school when I was in my 20s, and I remember actually telling my parents that I just wanted to be a yoga teacher because I started yoga when I was 12, but this is doing like yoga videotapes in my bedroom, and I was practicing yoga quite regularly, like in a disciplined fashion, by the time I was 17, because by then I could drive, and I grew up in a smaller town, so I was able to drive to the studios. But essentially, when I was in university, I realized I really wanted to teach yoga, and my parents thought, why are you in fashion school? But I thought, well, I'm already almost done with fashion school, so I'm not going to give up, but it is something I want to do. And when I moved to New York after finishing my university in North Carolina in the States, and yeah, there was a yoga school in the same building as my fashion internship. And yeah, it was kind of a no-brainer for me, They had the training, and I just knew so deep in my heart that it was exactly what I wanted to do. And I was an intern at the time. I was also working at in a bar on the side, and I just went to them. I was like, I have to do this training. Like, I have to do it. I knew so deeply that I needed to do it, and I didn't really have that much money. And they offered me a scholarship because I did a work exchange and I just sold my car. So I had a little bit of money where I could put it towards the training. Actually, the amount that I sold the car for was the amount that they asked me to pay for the training. I mean, my car was like cheap because I'd wrecked it, but it was like 1,200, So um, that's how I got started. And the rest is kind of history. This was 11 years ago, actually, when I did my first, a little over 11 years ago, actually, when I did my first teacher training. And it started in New York. Yeah.
And oh wow, that's so, I don't hear it so often that someone says, I started practicing yoga at such a young age, and then your yoga practice survived your teenage years. Like most of the hobbies I had before I was a teenager, I exchanged them for stupid things that I needed to do.
Yeah.
How, like, I want to know, because I started practicing yoga in my 20s, and I want to know, how is it that you have such a consistent or a practice since such a young age? How was it cool back then?
No, I don't think I was doing cool things. I wasn't very sportsly, so I didn't like sports. I didn't like anything that involved balls or things being thrown at my face. I was a dancer, and I my dance teacher said, if you want to improve, I mean, she said this to the class. She said, if you want to improve your dancing, you should do yoga. And I lived maybe a 30-minute drive from the studio, but anyways, I wasn't in a position where I could go to the studio all the time, nor was that like financially possible. So I bought a yoga videotape, and because I was determined to improve my dancing. And I mean, I wouldn't say that I was doing it every day, like waking up, but I do remember as a child, especially at this age, where your body's changing, that it was the first time that I felt really, I remember having this feeling of like, I feel good in my body. And this was such a rare thing, that especially as a teenager in body changes and also being in the dancing world, that I actually felt good in my body. And I think that's what kept me coming back to it, because I knew that I would feel good afterwards. I was like, there's always something that just, I feel better. And of course, the challenges change from the time that you're 12 to 20 to your 30s, or, and beyond. But it's, I always feel better afterwards. So I think that's what kept me dedicated, you know.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that was interesting. And yeah, of course, it totally made sense. I also felt very uncomfortable as a teenager in my body. I didn't like it.
Yeah.
But okay, so I think one of the first important learnings that, and it's not the first time we hear that, né? But what we can see from you today, the career you have, what you have created, is a result of 11 years since you had your first training, né? So things don't happen overnight. That's something that I sometimes observe is that I think we are sometimes too impatient. We think, I did a training last year, and today it has to be everything and more for my life, né? But I think it's nice to hear from you that, wow, it took you 11 years to get where you are today. Yeah. So, but how was the beginning then? You you did a training in New York, and then you started teaching afterwards, or how did you start?
Yeah, I remember. So I started teaching, and then I did my training, and then shortly after I was also a nanny. So I always chose jobs that gave me flexibility. And so I've always been a freelancer. I've always been self-ständiga, even back in the States, which is actually kind of mind-blowing to me, because I realized I never had a 9 to 5 job ever, ever. So it never really worked for me. But I think for me, choosing jobs that always gave me flexibility, and also doing things that wasn't going to be compromisable. So even I remember when I was a nanny, the moment I would get an offer to teach a yoga class, and I would think, okay, this is what I'm working towards, I would always have that conversation. Like, I would hear these thoughts in my head, like, oh no, but you have this responsibility as a nanny. And I was like, no, but your path, your passion is to teach yoga. So always having those conversations around whatever that passion was. And of course, over time, the passions have shifted, and I'm directing energy towards other things, and it starts to, I would say, get a bit elevated. But that's essentially how I started out. And then over time, I peeled back more nanny hours to the point where I was just teaching yoga. And then, other jobs came in. I was, working with essential oils. I also had a legging line where I was doing fashion on the side, but it was more of a passion project. And towards the end of the time in New York, I was in New York for 7 years. I was also managing the teachers, basically. So I had like a small role in managing in the studio, but all of this was complementary and also supportive of my energy levels as to what I could create, because running around teaching classes all the time is really draining. So it's also what I tell, the students that do my teacher training. It's like you have to do what you love, but also start with something where you can pick up like 1 or 2 classes a week. Because also the thing is, yes, I love teaching yoga, I will teach yoga for the rest of my life, it saved my life, but it takes a lot to hold space in this way, especially the more sensitive you become, the more refined your practice becomes. So you have to have these protection methods as well. So I would also say, teaching classes is great for connecting to community and, and sharing what you love, but deepening those offerings with workshops, with retreats, these are other things I do. So I've been doing retreats for about 8 years. So, I mean, just for perspective. So I think for the first 3 years, I was, teaching and having a little bit of side job, but definitely after 3 years, I wasn't nannying anymore. I was full on yoga in whatever that shape presented itself.
Mhm.
Guest teachers and teacher trainings, workshops, retreats, privates, etc.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, if I'm allowed to translate it a bit into business language, it means to develop different kind of products and not just
Yes.
sell one product, which is a yoga class, but
Uh-huh.
still it's probably a good product to refine your craft as a yoga teacher. For me, it's in coaching, I work as a coach now. I think it's a bit the same, that doing one-on-one coaching is exactly what I want to do a lot, because it gives me a lot of experience, but it cannot be the only product that I keep on selling. Or maybe it can if I really want to, but it doesn't need to. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear you. And I also coach as well now. It was also something where towards the end, I was like, okay, how do we work more deeper, or cultivating these one-on-one experiences, when I give yoga private, so weaving in that coaching as well. So, but this comes over time. I don't think people need to do a training and then think, oh, I also need coaching and Reiki and sound. And it's like this all developed over 11 years, of just learning more and more and more,
Mm-hmm.
and how it
Mm-hmm.
can also complement what it is that you're offering, and refining your products and,
Yeah.
niche.
And how do you decide what you are learning more?
I mean, purely what I feel called to
Mhm.
to do.
So
It's
you mean you just follow your interest and your passion?
my yeah, as crazy as it sounds, I follow my passion and my intuition. And of course, sometimes like I'm really quick to become obsessive over things. I find, like, if I find something interesting, I'm like, oh, I want to go really deep into it. And so I allow myself, because sometimes I'm like, oh, I want to get a master's in something. Well, it's like, okay, well, before you get a master's in it, maybe you take some courses or you read some books. So like my library is full of books, of different topics related to everything that I love. So that's where I start, and then I do little trainings from there, or little courses. And I mean, there's so much out there now that's there for us to support us in expanding our understanding, and, and learning new techniques. So there's plenty now.
What's your experience? Can you talk a bit about how you see this? being multifaceted and expressing that you have various interests and that you also maybe have various offers versus the thing what the business experts are screaming at you, that you have to find a really specific niche and be really spitz, is what we say in German, and just do that one thing to become the ultimate expert. Like, what is your experience with that? What do you have to say about this?
Yeah, I go back and forth in that, because I think on one hand, one could say it is multifaceted. I am doing a lot, I'm doing sound healing, breath work, yoga, I DJ, I'm doing like conscious events, or sometimes I even DJ a wedding, so it's, but what I feel personally, it's all connected. That's how I feel. I feel it's all connected. Like the music that I play plays into the atmosphere of the class that I'm creating. Everything that I do is about expanding consciousness. So, I mean, if I were to label it as one thing, I would just say, yeah, I'm a conscious expander. And I do this through the modalities of teaching yoga, whether that's being the training or in class, retreats, etc., offering breath work, sound healing, and coaching. And then even DJing, I would say, helps to expand consciousness, because if you do it with an intentional way, and also when I do ceremonies as well. So it's all conscious expanding. So I guess that's what I should put on my next business card, because my friend said, oh, no, people aren't going to take you seriously if you have this long list of things. I mean, that's also why I put fashion a little bit to the side, because I still do fashion for fun, but it's not my job. Because this, I'm like, well, it's also, I don't have the energetic capacity to do this in a mass marketing way, but I can do it to nourish myself. So, yeah, I guess that's my take on it. It's at the same time, it's like we're all connected, and it's important to have a niche for sure, but yeah, it's, you're doing what you love and you're sharing what you're able to do. And I also pick and choose what I have capacity for during the week, as far as like what I'm going to share. So that's kind of my way of holding a boundary around doing so much. It's just containing it.
Yeah, cool. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And then there have been some also pivotal moments in your path and in your career path. Now, I'm sure it wasn't always just straight and up, but sometimes a turn around or a circle or a step backwards or something, because it's normal, no? It's for everyone. But yeah, how were these moments in your career?
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest pivotal moment. So the first 7 years I was living in New York, I was like a super dynamic vinyasa yoga teacher, very focused on having an advanced practice, super disciplined in all ways, shapes, and forms. I was still having fun. I was still, having a really great time. I don't want to come across as like the one that wakes up at 5 a.m. to practice. There's nothing wrong with that. It's also something I'm like, that sounds great. And maybe one day, but when I moved to Berlin, it was also a different style of teaching, and I was starting to getting into sound healing for my own personal practice to receive. But actually, after 1 year of living in Berlin, I had this accident or near-death experience where I was in a car accident, and I'd broken my C2 in my neck, which is crazy to think that I can even move my limbs or even communicate right now, because it governs all sorts of regulations in the body. And I broke my rib and I broke my arm, and it's this was a very eye-opening experience for me in many ways, not just for having the near death and out of body, but also when the surgeon comes into the room and he says, yeah, yoga saved your life, because if the fracture in my C2 was just split in half, so essentially the neck, and they're like, if it wasn't for yoga and your flexibility of your spinal column would have snapped in half and you would have been done. So you really have this feeling of like, oh my gosh, I owe my life to yoga. And that's also why I was like, I have to do this training. I have to offer this training because I want people to also have these techniques. But also in this, I would say yoga also saved my life, because I had the tools and techniques. I had the meditations. I had the breath work, not the activating breath work. I wasn't doing this in my neck brace. But I had all of these different modalities of ways of going inwards. And in a way, it was such a gift, because I had 6 weeks, which is nothing, but I had 6 weeks to really just sit with myself and to also study. Like, I mean, I wasn't just in meditation all day, of course, but I was super sensitive to what I was consuming because everything was affecting my subconscious and my dreams. So, um, yeah, I kept it pure also with what I was watching, who I was hanging out with. So I was reading lots of books, I was studying a lot, and I was really going deep in different healing modalities. And that's what got me into transpersonal coaching, sound healing, and breath work, and also working with different plant medicines because, I was having all this time to just kind of like researching, sort of like, oh, this just happened. What can I do? And yeah, I mean, I decided to get trained in a lot of these things as well because I wanted to offer it. But it was also for me this moment of laying in bed thinking, I don't know if I'll have an advanced practice again. So something I was super identified with was having this like being able to teach master classes. And I was like, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to do that again. And sure enough, I am. I'm able to. And but this also took quite a lot of discipline and devotion. But it's, too, sometimes I just have to remind myself that I'm not 25 anymore. I just turned 34, so the body is changing also as I get older, and it's still doing a great job, of course, of course, but like it's not bending the way it did when I was 23, 25. And I was a rubber bands. But yeah, I don't know if I kind of went off on a tangent on that, but I would say these were the pivotal moments in my life where I also realized too, as far as sustainability with the body, that it's nice to do other things where I can be more centered, seated, and yeah, creative in my own way, and also really working with the mind. I find is really fascinating. So yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Oh my God. I just had goosebumps and I nearly needed to cry because, yeah, this accident thing, it sounds really horrible. And I'm going to share it now. My dad had an accident last year, around 1.5 years ago. And yeah, so I experienced how just 1 second can totally change a person's life.
Yeah.
And like all the effects, it's like really a pivotal moment is a nice word. It can also be called a traumatic experience, that there are so many levels what it does with the person it happens to, so many others around. And yeah, since I had this experience of being so close to someone or connected with someone who had an accident, I know a bit more, I think, what it means. And before, I've heard many times of people saying like, yeah, I had this accident and changed my life, but it is really something very strong that can happen in someone's life. And yeah, I just feel this everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, I caught myself saying this the other day because, and also working at ceremony and whatnot. And, I mentioned to a friend that I said, actually, I think for me, the biggest moment in my life, or sometimes I come a little bit unfazed by certain things. And I'm like, because actually, like I've left my body, and I mean, my consciousness has left my body, and there's no, I would never suggest someone to impose this on themselves, of course, but like when you have a near death experience, and I was in a position where I saw myself outside of my body, and I was like, oh, I have to go back, or I need to go back, or I should go back. And when you have this moment of like, wow, I was put on earth for a reason, I'm able to come back. And it's just this feeling of connection to life in itself, that it's just this immense gratitude that I don't think that there's anything in the world, like I would say, like I have gratitude and this, but this feeling that you have is, and that's why for me, I didn't have, so I had struggles in the accent. I'm not gonna come across as like I was so holy and pure. Like I definitely had my breakdown moments, of course, like during this phase. But it always kind of circled back to this point of like, but I'm alive and I have this gift to be alive. And yeah, it's such an interesting polarity, because you have the trauma on one hand that's really dark and healing, and on the other hand it's full of so much light. It's so much light. It's like it's overwhelmingly powerful how these traumas actually carry a lot of light in them. And I think um and I allowed myself to go into it with different healing modalities as well, just to kind of piece it together. So um yeah, and I think for anyone listening too, it doesn't have to be an accident. I think challenges or any kind of unexpected curveballs that come to us in life, I mean, even grief in itself is, one of these things that we experience, loss in life or a heartache. There's always, they say the shadows are the portals to transformation. So it's what allows us to go beyond and to understand a little bit more. And the other thing I'll add is just that my trauma therapist mentioned to me too, that like our consciousness reveals to us what we're ready to see when we're ready to see it. So for anyone that's doing inner work or is experiencing something, I think there's no need to really hold back, because you're strong enough to handle whatever. It's your consciousness, like your body, your mind, everything is so beyond intelligent, like to even what we can comprehend, even what we can fathom. It's so intelligent that it's just working in its own divine scientific way. I mean, it's just working. So it's there to support us, and this is something I really feel and I deeply connected to after my accident. So all to say, I never feel like it's something for someone to feel sorry for. It's like I was given a life lesson, like a training, all these years I put so much money into my trainings, and now I got my own training.
So now, I mean, obviously you sit here, you smile, you mentioned you could have an advanced yoga practice again afterwards. So you've healed from this accident quite a lot. And with that distance, how then has this moment changed your career? What have you then created differently afterwards when you were able to work again and everything?
Yeah, I mean, definitely more introspection, a lot more introspection. I was always weaving in Dharma and themes, always and forever in my classes. But I also allowed myself to be more creative and not just focus so much on the physical body, right? So it also nourished my creative part of my being. And this for me was sound, a huge, huge component, whether that's playing the singing bowls or DJing. So I was DJing and making my breath mixes. This is also what really got me into mixing music, and then creating these conscious dance parties. And even if it's not a party that one would deem conscious because it's a party, I would say, yeah, but you can bring consciousness everywhere. It's the same thing at festivals, it's just your state of being of where it's coming from. So how it's changed since then is also really creating space to offer these techniques to people. So in the yoga teacher training, compiling all of this information and being able to pass on the teachings. So it became less of a casual way of like, oh, I'm offering these classes, but how can I really create deep space for people? So, and I've always felt called to do that, but I think there was more of like an anchoring in that calling when I was after the accident. And then also doing the coaching, of course. This is just it's very supportive as well in my own teaching. So it shape shifted in this way. Yeah.
That's also something that I really appreciate about what you do, is that you that you also go to the unconscious party scene. I think it's also like a really nice change I think I observed in the last 5 years or so in Berlin, that there are more and more conscious parties happening. I live in Berlin, or I used to, I don't know at the moment, but I spent quite a lot of time in the last 10 years in Berlin. And what is it again that what's like the, you know, the point that connects partying, dirty, smoking, drug places where you are wake up all night with consciousness? Like, what's the similarity? And why do you think there is also this movement and more conscious parties developed? Why do people want this? What is happening there?
I kind of come at this from two sides. So
Mm-hmm.
on one side, I feel the conscious parties are starting because there's a collective of people that are feeling this awakening and they're raising their vibration, et cetera, and they want a safe space where it can be conscious and it can be celebratory at the same time. So I see that and I value that, and I also love offering that space, you know. So I think that there's kind of this niche or this need, but I also feel that something my friend Elisa, who also does sound work, we were talking about it and we were saying that, like, kind of like the highest level of your practice, maybe it's not the highest, but a high level of your conscious practice is being able to remain in your being, to remain conscious, and to be able to take that into other scenes. So, and I would then elaborate on that, is because I said, you know, I feel my true calling is a conscious expander. So as a conscious expander, doing it in a conscious scene, I feel it's already been touched upon there. Like, these people are already on their path. Maybe they're also seeking, for sure. I'm not saying that, because I do encounter people like this, and by no means am I claiming to be at the top, but like I have been very deep in my practice for like a very, very long time. Um, you know, so as far as like my spiritual practice and etc., this has been since I was a child. And what I feel is that actually, to be a conscious expander, it's also important to go to the clubs. And it's not just me making an excuse, but I love dancing, I love music, and I don't need drugs to enjoy it. It's like, when the music is good, the music is good. And actually, when you're in your essence, like when you're really connected to your energy and your essence, you meet the best people. You know, you find yourself in the right pockets of the dance floor. And actually, I think this is the best protection mechanism, is to just be in your essence. And it doesn't mean that like creeps won't come up to you, but if you're conscious and you're able to communicate, you can indirectly educate people. I think we have the ability to touch people when we least expect it. And it doesn't have to be in a teaching form. Like, I don't go to the club and say, oh, I don't do this and this because of this and this and this.
Mm.
But I can say, oh, yeah, I don't. Of course, people offer me drugs all the time. And I say, oh, yeah, I don't do drugs. And they're like, really? And I'm like, no, I mean, I don't. When I moved to Berlin, I said, I don't do drugs anymore because it's like, it's a crazy party scene and the clubs never close. This is the most dangerous thing I could ever do because there's no boundary. It's like 72 hours. I'm like, no way. I'm not going to do that. So I think even just speaking into your own truth, it just inspires other people. And I also have plenty of friends that are like this as well in my life, you know, that talk about their morning routines and everything. I'm like, wow, yeah. And like, you think about how that impacts you and you're like, oh yeah, you feel naturally inspired. So um just to say, like, I think there's nothing wrong with going to the club. I think there's nothing wrong with having a really good time. And I involve myself in anything that like is able to expand my consciousness and my awareness, and doing it within in reason. And I'm
Mm.
also not going to claim myself to be like the complete pure angel by any means, and nor do I don't have judgment for anyone that does drugs, but I do notice that if it gets too druggy, that I just remove myself basically,
Mm.
or separate myself, or you know, I just take some time. It's just, it's again, it's a guidance of my energy. So um but it's really great that these conscious scenes are happening as well, because it's creating a stronger magnet and connections and deeper connections as well, with people that want to be in this. But I guess I hear it too often that people can't have both. You know, they're like, oh yeah, like they completely cut it out of their life, and I'm like, I can never cut out dancing out of my life. It's a huge part of me. It would be killing a part of myself. So I will always go to the club. I will always dance all, when I feel the calling, I feel the calling. So yeah.
Yeah, the last thing you said is exactly what I did. And that's, I think, why it inspires me so what you did. And I'm like, wow, I can do both. Because when I had my spiritual awakening, I stopped. It changed who I was, and it changed what I did completely. It changed my life. And it's nice and it's beautiful. And there can also always be waves and everything back and forth, né? But for a long time, actually until now, I stopped going to clubs. I totally changed what I did. And of course, it's good on some sides, but after a while, I noticed what was a shadow from that I kind of like didn't accept a part of who I was, that there was something about my past self that I didn't want to be anymore. And I pushed into the corner of that's not good. And I was not good. That's what I said, basically, then to myself. Nah? Yeah. And that was my path. And there was even a time where I was ashamed and I tried to hide that I like partying in my 20s. Now I was like, oh my God, nobody's going to take me seriously as a coach if they know what I did in these clubs in my 20s.
Absolutely.
And then
I also had this as well, just to
yeah,
also that it wasn't always such a clean cut. I mean, I think when I was doing my advanced teacher trainings and having all these strict practices, I really felt like, oh, I don't want to tell anyone that I like to go out, or I always felt like I had to kind of sugarcoat it a bit. I'd be like, yeah, I went out, but I was home. Like
it's
I
just
was
for
like,
the music.
yeah, and I'm like, who cares, So it's I mean, I still live in Berlin, and that's why I live here. I feel so I'm calling here because the polarities of the consciousness scene and the club scene, it's just they're very strong. And I'm like, okay, let's bridge that gap, basically. Um, yeah, become one. That means
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And for me, that's also such a nice thing that I experienced in the last few years, that I'm finding more of a balance there. I still don't go to parties anymore because it's too loud and I get tired. Maybe it's also just because I got older. I don't know. But that I'm not ashamed anymore about who I was. I'm really glad that I arrived here, but I also had to be in this denial phase in between. But I just wanted to also share this with everyone. Yeah.
yeah, and I think it also makes us more relatable. Because I think as coaches, if we come across like we have it all figured out, then it doesn't I don't know, it's appealing, yes, but I think it's important to be relatable to people. So I also, when people come to me and they tell me that they're dealing with XYZ, I'm like, I went through all of that. Like even while I was teaching yoga, even as a yoga teacher, maybe not all of everything, but like I also have my own shadows, so it's and looking at them and working with them, of course. Like, yeah, I
Yeah.
don't think it
Yeah.
makes any better or worse of a person. I think perfection is just being true to yourself.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the same goes for yoga teachers as well, and coaches, now um, that, mm, that we, I don't know, try as good as we can, or yeah, that we are authentically really expressing who we are, so our students don't get the wrong idea of I am somewhere better or whatever, né? Like spiritual ego, guru, or the toxic spiritual movements or aspects. I think it's as a teacher or as someone who yes is sometimes in a position of power because someone asks for help, or nah, and you're helping someone. I think it's important to be responsible with that power and to yeah Okay. So I really want to know, what is Shamanika Yoga School? What does that mean?
So, you know what's funny? My last name is Schamens, and my friend Bianca, her last name is Hanika. And when we were writing the manual, we just blended our last names together, and to make it Shamanica. And it was like, this is actually such a great name. But we did our training with Anna Forrest. That's how Bianca and I met. Was in Anna Forrest training, and there's a lot of shamanism and ceremonial work involved as well in the Forrest yoga practice. So it does actually kind of carry like multiple meanings. It's not just our last name, but we weave in lots of rituals. It's not just, yes, we have like the guidelines from the 200-hour Yoga Alliance as far as like the philosophy, the techniques, the anatomy, the asanas, how to teach. But we're also incorporating different rituals and whatnot as well to connect to elements, not just externally, but also elementally within ourselves. And I think what makes our training really unique is that we also came from different lineages. So she also did Shivananda and obviously with Forest Yoga. And I came with Dharma, where we met in Nokon, and I studied with Dharma Mitra in New York. And I also did some creative vinyasa trainings, sequencing, Ayurveda, and of course I have my basic Hatha Vinyasa. But all in all, we both have like 1,000 hours of training each. So we're able to kind of blend a lot of what we're learning and what resonates and applying it into like the traditional way of also how you teach yoga. So with this comes like your connecting to like your authentic voice and really who you are and in your gifts, because as we've been talking about so much in this podcast, it's like being multifaceted. I mean, connecting to your truth, connecting to your passion. It's like, well, what does that mean? This means really understanding yourself. And so a lot of our training, there is reflection on this, and it even weaves into like the business of yoga as well. So people are ready to carry these teachings out into the world, whether that is in their own daily practice, because I find really it's having these techniques is everything. Um, I mean, I use them all the time. It just wasn't when I was, bedridden, it's anytime in a state of confusion or instability, which happens more often probably than one would think, but connecting to them. So yeah, that's essentially what our training is. And we have our next one in November, and we have it in Ibiza because Bianca lives in Ibiza at the moment, and we do some online modules, like dip into it and then really saturate ourselves to 2 weeks in Ibiza, and then do some online modules afterwards, help with integrating. And what else was I going to say? I don't know, but yes, this is how it's formed. And yeah, we have also our early bird ends like in a few days as well. So
but that's so cool. So you're going to Ibiza?
yes.
Yeah, amazing. I think it's really nice because what I see is that many yoga teacher trainings are also in Bali or in India, and I think it's also nice and exciting to travel there. But it's also really cool to have some options in Europe, because there are so many nice places here too, no?
Yeah. And I mean, it's not such a long flight. And what's also nice about being there in Ibiza is that we're in a villa. It's very exclusive, and we keep the private very intimate as well. So a lot of times when you have these trainings in India, or you have these trainings in Bali, and even a lot of the trainings I did in the States, I can't speak for all trainings across the board, but what happens is that, there's like 40, 50 people in the training. And so the individual attention gets a bit lost. And with Shamanica, we really want to we want to get to know our students, and we want to really be able to cultivate that idea again of like, what does it mean to connect to yourself and to really see and to really understand someone. So that's why we keep it in this villa. It's a really nice, sweet villa in Ibiza with a pool. So you can also still retreat yourself. There's a little difference too when you're doing a training just on the weekends in Berlin, for example. You're kind of saturating yourself and going back out, but this allows you to really like dive deep and to be with yourself, to really be with yourself and to understand yourself and not get pulled back into the external world. It's maintaining that connection but having that time to dip into it and then integrate out is important. That's what we do online before and the online after, so people are ready.
So this is spontaneous. We haven't talked about it before, so you can also say no, ne? But you mentioned before that in the Shamanika Yoga School, you also have like some rituals included and stuff, ne? Is there like a small gift, like a small ritual that maybe you do at this time of the year, or that is nice every day that you could explain and for the people listening, if they want to get inspired or try it by themselves at home, I would love to have one.
Yeah, so with Shamanika Yoga School too, like if we're setting up the space, we're honoring, the four directions in northwest, east, south, and what they respect, and also the earth and the sky. So this is something that you can do. This is more something we would be doing to like open up the space. We're doing a cacao ceremony or opening up the yoga class. I personally don't do the whole four directions thing every morning when I wake up. But what I would say is as far as like my own rituals that are like yoga techniques that I carry on with me are the one I've been doing a lot is just Soham, not just Soham, but it is very simple. Soham meaning I am that. There's a longer, more complex version of this meditation that was passed down to me by Dharma Mitra. But it's this connection, this unification mantra, really connecting to yourself, connecting to your energy. So I do this this morning. I did it in meditation, and also I do it sometimes if on Saturday I was just kind of like riding my bike all around town, and I was like just so hum with my breath. And I think what helps in connecting to yourself is affirmations. So having your positive affirmations written out. And yeah, I don't think this is really like traditional yoga. This is a little bit more of like what we hear about in moon ceremonies or in coaching as well. But because I said before, I'm really fascinated with the mind, so I keep my positive my affirmations at my altar. So I read them there in the morning when I'm, to kind of remind myself as to what I'm doing, why am I here, and what am I working toward, and to also recognize if things have changed. Sometimes I write down something and I'm like, I can put that to the side. But these are really powerful, and just mantras in general. So learning different mantras, having a mantra that works for you is I always do the purification mantra because this is one that's luckily always stuck in my head from Dharma. And I remember even going to a fusion on last weekend? Oh, yeah, well, almost last weekend, and taking the train up, and it was just like crazy loud with drunks, like at 7 a.m. And I have no problem with people celebrating their life, but for me, it was like 7 a.m. I don't want to listen to it, and I don't want to hear it, and I need my energy for the day. I'm like going to fusion. Like I can't. This is another thing. People that drink and do drugs, I don't know how they do it. I don't know how they maintain their energy. I'm like, I have to stay. That's just me. But anyways, I do mantras, and this is also what helps to tune people out and to also tune deeper into myself. It was like super powerful in doing this. Yeah.
And this you also pass down. I really liked how you said that about your teacher. This is also what you pass down to your students in Shamanica Yoga School in Ibiza, maybe.
Yeah, and of course, like so many breathing techniques and different purification techniques, because I think above all, we really need to work on how to purify our bodies. It's not just because of what you consume. It's about like sometimes we think, oh, detox. I want to detox because I ate this or drank this. It's like, no, what are you consuming through your eyes, through what you're hearing, through what you're feeling? I also have this quite often with people when they tell me their problems. I immediately feel it, and I'm like, I have to clear it. I have to clear it.
Yeah.
And also just, I mean, whether it's in the training or not, but smudging, having copal in your house is also very, very, very powerful. Just that I set off my smoke detector all the time, but it's it's really powerful just to cleanse your energy and to really clear out what isn't yours. And in the end, I put it on my window, so it also goes out into Nokon. So
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, purify these streets. So, yeah.
All right, Katzi. Hey, thank you so much for your time, ne? And for your openness and your honesty and for your work. I really enjoyed this conversation with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, if there's something else that you have on your heart that you haven't said yet, that if someone is listening now who's maybe like a yoga teacher who is starting out in a yoga teacher career, or maybe it's someone who practices Reiki, or, you know, a conscious entrepreneur lady. If there's a conscious entrepreneur lady who's in the beginning and who's like, give me an advice, I need a really good advice from someone more experienced. Do you have an advice to the end?
You know what's crazy is that my dad's voice came into my head when you're saying this, and he would always say you have to pound. It doesn't sound so yoga, but he would always say that you have to pound the pavement, meaning like you just have to go for it. And I mean, I don't want to put this like masculine filter on it so much, because I don't think it has to come with this connotation of like pounding the pavement. But I feel this comes naturally. It's like when you're doing what you love. I mean, my high school teacher told me this. She's like, if you do what you love, you'll never feel like you're working a day in your life. So if you're connecting to yourself every day and you're doing what you love and you're mindful of your energy, things will flow into place. And sometimes that might mean you're a yoga teacher and then you recognize, oh, I want to also do this instead. You know, I always say like yoga teaching is what also led me to DJing. So it doesn't have to be so identifiable. Like you don't have to identify with one label. But as far as like, yeah, the advice is like, you know, if you want to make it happen, then you also need to take action on it and really go for it. This is always such a fine line, though. You know, it's like taking action but giving space for it to come. Taking action, giving space for it to come. But if you're mindful of your energy, you know when it's time to go. But especially if you're new and you're starting out, or you're in a new city, whatever that means, because I also got this dose when I moved to Berlin. You really, for me, it was going outside my comfort zone. It's like you really have to make a point to connect with people and to introduce yourself and really be confident in what you're doing. You know, it's like, hi, I'm Katzi. I'm a yoga teacher and I'm a DJ. And even if there's any sort of uncertainty or this thought of, oh, I just started teaching, the your training doesn't equate to like how long you've had experience in life, you know. So you can, if you go with it full on and saying like, hi, I'm this person, you're always ready. We can't wait for the right moment to be ready. That was not one piece of advice, but this was me. This is the problem. I'm a Gemini. It's not a problem, but it's like, yeah, take what you want from what I just said.
I take the pound pavement from Daddy Katzi.
Just pound the pavement, but don't get burned out.
But
So
sometimes relax.
yes, you have to relax, you know, the yin and the yang. So, but yeah, follow your heart and really go out there and do it with confidence is maybe it.
Apropos relax, if I want to relax in one of your yoga classes, where are you teaching at the moment? Where can I do so? Or when?
I do have a WhatsApp group, and I do always post things on my Instagram. I'm pretty good about that on my Instagram stories. So Cat Sparkles is that name. Cat with a K, Sparkles a Z at the end. But you can find me pretty much at Yellow Yoga and at Har Studio at the moment. So in Nokon and Kreuzberg. And sometimes I'm in Mitte and I bounce around. So that's why I'd say it's always important just to stay in touch, because I'm always doing special offerings as well, where I can really go a bit deeper, a bit sweeter. It's a bit more nourishing. But yeah, relaxing, I would say yin and the sound baths. But if you want something dynamic, definitely come to a vinyasa class. And yeah, my Sunday class at Har when I'm there is a mixture of everything. It's transpersonal trinity. So this is like my baby as well. So yeah.
All right. Thank you for being here. And thank you for listening, everyone. Have a nice day.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. This was Pussy, Mind and Soul. My name is Sophia Tome. I am your host. And if you want to know more about the guest of today's show, or if you want to know more about me, you can find all kinds of information in the show notes. I am so much looking forward to connect with you, maybe on Instagram, or maybe on TikTok, or maybe on YouTube, wherever you are in the digital space. Most likely I'm also there. And if you feel like it, send me a message. And thank you for listening. I'm looking forward to the next episode. And until then,